also organized a similar workshop focusing broadly on the topic of clean cooking, which includes cooking using electricity, and it brought together all the business associations for clean cooking in the East African countries to talk about the work they are doing, to talk about their shared challenges, and to talk about what they could do together to address these challenges. Then the fourth area, which I think is very important to mention, is that recently we started the process of developing a regional renewable energy policy for the East African community. And in this policy, clean cooking, which covers also electric cooking, is one of the thematic areas. At the moment, as a region, we don't have a target for clean cooking, and even out of that, what amount of it should come from electric cooking. By the end, when we develop this policy, you will expect that the East African community will have a target on clean cooking, and also how much of that target can be achieved using electric cooking. This definitely will aggregate the already existing targets which are set, for example, for Uganda, for Kenya. I think for Tanzania, they also have an action plan which has things related to electric cooking, and including all the other countries as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Yunus. Ladies and gentlemen, those who are just joining us, we are discussing a very important topic on designing holistic energy access plans, and we are asking a question: where does electric cooking fit in? We all agree that as a country, and of course benchmarking from the rest of the countries, we always develop plans, policies and strategies, but do we always look at critical elements and areas that really concern things to do with what countries need to move forward as far as different country priorities are concerned? We know that as a country, Uganda, we have developed the energy transition plan. We have the energy policy and many other policies and strategies. But we want to find out whether, as part of priority, the element of e-cooking has been considered. And on that, going back to Engineer Herbert, we want to find out what are the key elements that have been pointed out under the e-cooking strategy. We know that I think it's been under development. You may advise us whether it is completed and what are going to be the next steps in implementing. But to be more specific, you could share to us what are the key elements of the e-cooking strategy and what is required for it to be effectively delivered. Thank you.
Thank you, Ronnie. Thank you, my fellow panelists. Ronnie, before I respond to the question, I wanted to appreciate my colleague. I think I'm loving the efficiency of how we are summarizing the sessions. In the morning, we had a session discussing public health and e-cooking or clean cooking. And we said, everyone breathes, the quality of the air you breathe matters. Then in this session, we are saying, everyone eats, the type of fuel or technology you use for preparing that food matters. I think we'll have another tagline for the third session for this afternoon, but thank you very much. Now, speaking about the e-cooking strategy, and I think you laid a very good preamble that we have this tied within the framework of the National Energy Policy of 2023, which has paid special attention to clean cooking and the broader aspects of renewable energy. Now, for the e-cooking strategy, yes, right, it is 99.8% complete. Look out for a message where we'll be inviting you to the launch of the strategy. I'm aware that many of us in the room, a good number of us in the room, have participated in its development, so we have a flavor of what is there, but I will summarize the strategy. So if you have to remember the Uganda strategy, and I think Cypros, who also articulated the strategies, the other strategies, and my colleague here to my left around the region, our e-cooking strategy is looking at two fundamental or principal elements. I will summarize those so that we do not forget them. The first is the enabling environment. Very fundamental, and I think it's Dennis who already touched on some of these aspects. The physical elements, the regulations, the standards. We want to make sure that quality is assured and ensured. But importantly, I think Dennis also mentioned the point around the institutional capacity, that we are establishing a clean cooking unit. And just to take a moment to appreciate our partners, the UK government that is supporting us, again through GGI, which you represent, Mr. Moderator. So yes, enabling environment. Issues around even the technical capacity. We realized that, for instance, when you look at standards, development of standards, it's important also look at aspects of testing. We need infrastructure to test and ensure that the product getting out on the market to our people is of the right quality. Issues around coordination. I think a number of sessions have discussed this. For us at the ministry, this is very important that we move in a very coordinated manner if we are to achieve these ambitious targets that we've set ourselves, particularly within the clean energy space. Now, the second important aspect of our e-cooking strategy is what I would call addressing of focusing on the triple constraint for energy access. The triple constraint, the triple A constraint, sorry. Triple A constraint for energy access. And I will speak about the three A's at a time. The first A, I think, which you already talked about, is the affordability. The issue of affordability. Affordability of both the technology but also the fuel. So we want to make sure that this technology is as affordable as it can be for our people so that we promote what we are preaching, but also the fuel, in this case the electricity. And government has put in place a number of interventions to ensure that there's still work to do, but I think there's progress in that endeavor. The second A is availability. We want to make sure that this technology is available. We want to make sure that in our nearest shop, where you get your typical groceries or food items for your kitchen, we have this technology. So availability becomes very important. We have also seen, while we're developing the strategy, that actually if we raised awareness to an extent, right now probably there's no enough product on market. You know, if you mobilized Ugandans, they are very resilient, they can react, but do we have enough product on the market? So this is very important. The third A is awareness. And my honorable minister talked about the evangelism yesterday. And I think one of the strategies or methods we do that awareness is through forums like this, where we interact, we have an opportunity to interact with stakeholders. So those three constraints are very important for any system or for anyone trying to design a successful energy access program. And those summarize really our strategy. So within those, it's important to also speak about affordability. What are we doing? What does the strategy talk about? It's important, I think we've already discussed the issue of mobilizing, coming up with the right financing mechanisms. Yesterday we received a presentation from UECCC that is, for instance, putting out some financing facilities to support this access. Issues around carbon finance, and I'm glad that we have my colleague from the Climate Finance Unit. These become very important in addressing this, what we would call the might be barrier of upfront cost. Within availability, when you look at electricity, government is doing a lot of interventions, implementing a number of efforts to ensure that the network, and that is for the customers that access the grid, is able to support some of these technologies that we intend to add to the grid. I think that is maybe, I will speak about awareness and make a plea to members in the audience that we are fortunate to have you, and I think outside we have a whole expo that has a lot of this technology. It is my plea that as you live here, grab yourself an EPC, become the change agent. Become the change agent, or if you do not grab one, at least make a plan, initiate a plan for you to get yourself an EPC. There's a number of models in the market where you can pay in installments. I think we have colleagues. Please pay attention in the we think is very important, and we are happy to support in that regard. Thank you.
Indeed, thank you. Thank you, Engineer Herbert. And let me come to you, Mr. Patrick, because this is directly linked to, I think, the work you've done in the past. I think ERA has introduced the e-cooking tariff, and I understand you've had some experiences. Kindly share some of the insights of how it is working, and if there is need for improvement, what do you think should be the approach?
Thank you very much, moderator. We have a product in the pricing of electricity that is called the cooking tariff. Maybe to elaborate that, one of the mandates that the Electricity Regulatory Authority has is to approve the tariffs and charges that Ugandans pay for the electricity services. One of the challenges and the message challenges that we're facing in the attempt to promote e-cooking is that cooking with electricity is very expensive. It is very hard to go to a population and tell them that if you cannot afford bread, you can take cake. You have a population that is grappling with the costs of living. Many people are buying charcoal, which they are even failing to afford. And then you're telling them to cook using electricity. That was the challenge that we were facing in our attempt to promote electric cooking. At that time, the technology that is currently known and available was not as common and available as it is, the electric pressure cooking technology. And there had been a study that was conducted under the auspices of MEX, Modern Energy Cooking Services, represented here on the panel, that compared the costs of cooking for the different technologies: charcoal, LPG, paraffin, and electricity. And at that time, the cost of electric cooking that were being compared were based on the efficiency of a hot plate. Now, let me tell you something, that if you boil water in a typical percolator, this boiling of water is likely to cost you half a unit. If you boil one of the hardest meals that we have, either beans or the hard meat, the hoof, what we call mlokone, in an electric pressure cooker, you're not likely to use half a unit. The maximum you are likely to use is half a unit. Now, if you were to do that meal on a hot plate, it's going to be very expensive. And that time, the study had showed that charcoal was still cheaper than electricity. So we said, okay, let's try to create a package of electricity that we can give to Ugandans and enable them to cook with electricity at a cost that is cheaper than charcoal. And at that time, we ended up with a package of 70 units that every household or domestic customer of electricity can purchase at 412 shillings. And at that time, if a household was able to purchase electricity at 412 shillings, it would be cheaper than using charcoal. Now, comes in the mix of energy efficiency using a pressure cooker. Even without any subsidized tariff, even without a cooking tariff, it has been established that electric cooking with an electric pressure cooker is more than 50% less than the cost of cooking using charcoal. So the message that we want to give Ugandans is that let's all embrace electric cooking. The benefits have already been stipulated, but the most important benefit is that for every meal that you cook in an electric pressure cooker, you're actually saving money compared to if you were to do that meal on charcoal. So from the year 2022, the electric cooking tariff has been implemented, and in terms of signaling, we have seen some benefits in terms of messaging, because before we introduced this electric cooking tariff, we had on average the customers on the domestic customer class, the average consumption per month was about 35 units per month. But we see today that this average has grown to between 42 units to 45 units a month. Of course, we also take cognizance that there are few customers who are above that average, and there are many people who are utilizing this electric cooking tariff. But everything else aside, even if you find the message very hard to take, you take the message that if you cook in an electric pressure cooker, even if the unit of electricity was at 1,000, your cooking is still going to be cheaper than if you used charcoal. And science and facts are there to prove that that is a reality. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Patrick. Let me come to you, Dr. Louise. I know that, I think from your experience, designing the pilots and the like, scaling up e-cooking, I think you've used some planning tools or models. And if you could share what are some of those models or tools that are available to support integrated energy planning.
Thank you. So the session is talking about integrated energy planning, and we've zoomed in on e-cooking. But one of the reasons we talk about integrated energy planning is because a cooking load has to be thought about when infrastructure is created. There have been examples where in other countries where villages have been electrified, but the wires are not strong enough to carry the load required for cooking. So to then go back and add a cooking load is millions. Whereas if it was done from the beginning, the infrastructure is ready and people can just turn it on and use it. So for anybody who's interested in the concept of integrated energy planning, which we all fully support e-cooking, but it's a good topic, and I know there's lots of students in the room. There's a great report just being published by an SE for All, Sustainable Energy for All, and MEX, that really digs into the tools and considerations for planning and implementing e-cooking. It demonstrates the opportunities, the benefits. It helps you develop scenarios which you can use in these models, and it talks about all the different models and tools available, many of which are open access. So you can just go onto the websites and you can plug some numbers in and you can start to see what different scenarios might look like. So just a plug for that resource. It's available on the MEX website, and it would be a great thing to look at for anyone who's enjoyed the discussions today about how we really build the consideration of e-cooking into the much wider challenge of growing our infrastructure.
Thank you, Dr. Lewis. Now, we've been talking about embedding e-cooking, but also looking at a broader perspective when it comes to emission reductions. And we realize that there's a direct linkage when we look at e-cooking as an intervention for reducing emissions. And as we may be aware, we have the Paris Agreement, and under that we have Article 6. I want to invite Mr. Mugaga to help us briefly talk about what Article 6 is, and maybe try and dissect for us if there are opportunities that we could pick from there and integrate them into our e-cooking agenda.
Thank you once again. Before I go to the question, it's good that we are preparing and gearing up for COP29 in Baku, where we're going to discuss and negotiate a number of articles, including the one that you're talking about. But before we go to Article 6 of the Paris Agreement, we have to look at Article 2.1c of the Paris Agreement and how it links to Article 9 that speaks to climate financing. So the emphasis that climate financing should be linked to the ambitions in reduction of emissions and resilience, actually, because e-cooking also speaks to resilience of communities. Now, that Article 6, is helping us meet at a global level the ambition of reducing our emissions and keeping the temperatures to 1.5, but also for Uganda, what does it mean? It means that we can also meet our targets in terms of reduction of emissions, like we've set it in the NDC of 24.7%. Now, how can Article 6 of the Paris Agreement that speaks to carbon markets be a driver for e-cooking? As on my side as the Minister of Finance and the Climate Finance Unit, Article 6 means climate financing. It's basically money for us. We look at it as an opportunity to raise financing for all actions, including e-cooking. And we are taking a whole government approach. And what do I mean by this? In the past, we've been hearing issues to do with Article 6 speaking to tree planting only. And people would talk about sale of credits out of tree planting. But then now we know that the opportunities even when it comes to e-cooking, because it means that directly by using EPCs, you're reducing emissions. You're reducing household emissions across board, and you're meeting your targets. And also, it means that also other sectors should be looked at. A case in point, I know most of you might not want to hear this, but the oil and gas sector of Uganda has opportunities when it comes to carbon markets. The methodology you use and the methodology that Uganda is going to use to extract oil is actually a methodology that directly speaks to a reduction of emissions. The operation in terms of leakages, the fact that we are looking at technologies that are going to help us reduce on leakages in production, that is an opportunity for carbon markets. So in all the sectors of Uganda, we have opportunities of carbon markets. So specifically, how can Article 6 be leveraged to push the agenda for e-cooking in Uganda? One, it is going to give us an opportunity to enable creation of emission reductions through e-cooking that can be traded and then help us to attract international investments. By having projects, I see a number of developers here that are geared towards reducing emissions and having the technologies to understand how much you've reduced. We have an opportunity to play a role in the international market. Now, I'm sure there are colleagues from Ministry of Water and Environment, but it is also helping us to do and improve transparency and accountability, because we are building a measurement and reporting and verification system to understand and ensure that our emissions and credits from carbon markets are credible. So already there's some work that is ongoing. As I told you, we are working on the fiscal carbon market framework, but the Ministry of Water and Environment is actually taking lead on the overall Article 6 framework. And these are going to help give the developers credibility to be in the market, to make sure that all those that want to play a role when it comes to e-cooking have an opportunity to raise more financing that can be used to scale up climate action or even undertake e-cooking, more e-cooking. Now, if you look at Article 6, where it talks about 6.2, where there are bilateral cooperation in terms of trading emissions between credits between countries, there's an opportunity to raise financing that can ultimately also be used to scale up e-cooking. Then lastly, I want to talk about the local benefits. When we go into projects that are carbon related in terms of e-cooking, we are not only getting the benefit when it comes to money for e-cooking, but also we have green jobs created. We have an opportunity to have the youth, the women involved in this sector. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Dennis. And let me come to Mr. Yunus, also looking at the regional perspective. I know we heard from Engineer Herbert here about what Uganda is doing, and he was able to take us through the different strategies, of course working with the rest of the other entities like ERA. As at the regional level, do you have unique ambitions? Because being at the center of the East African region, where Uganda is designing their plans and the rest of the other countries, what is your ambition or vision as far as having a comprehensive or integrated implementation roadmap is concerned?
Yeah, thank you very much. I would like to start by saying that my fellow panelists have made my work easier in responding to this question, because they have talked about strategies, they have talked about access to finance, they have also talked about standards. But the responses from them are looking at national level, at the level of Uganda. And at the East African community level, there are a couple of things we also plan. But before I go to that, let me start by why it would actually be important to do some of these things at regional level. Think of our market as Uganda. Haven't you ever had the issue that an investor would want to go somewhere but they feel the market is small? Yeah. So this is why it would be important to work at regional level. It aggregates the market. We stop looking at one country, but instead 8 countries. And that is the same thing with standards. If we do a standard, that standard will apply to 8 countries. We will also be able to maximize synergies if we're looking at regional level, and then there will be increased efficiency due to reduced duplication. Now, that said, what are the ambitions at regional level? At the moment, IACRI is developing their strategic plan for the year 2025 to 2030. And in this strategic plan, IACRI has identified 10 areas in which they would support the East African community and the partner states in their dream of pursuing a just energy transition. And clean cooking has been marked as one of those 10 areas. In there are targets and the indicators which have been set in relation to electric cooking. So, very first thing is to develop a regional strategy for clean cooking, which will capture electric cooking in it. And this strategy will definitely aggregate the already strategy developed from Uganda, will capture Kenya, will also capture Tanzania, and create a framework for the other countries which don't have an existing strategy yet. That's the first thing. Then the second very key area we are looking at is standards. All these electric cooking appliances we're talking about, there has to be a minimum energy performance standard so that the East African community does not become a dumping site for technologies which are not efficient, and then they end up in the country. But what we are saying is, instead of developing these minimum energy performance standards country by country, we develop them 8 times for the 8 East African countries. We are also looking at developing these standards at regional level. The good news here is that if 1 or 2 countries have developed these standards at national level, if the regional standard is eventually developed and it comes to play, it will override the national standard. And by law, the countries are mandated to adopt those standards within 6 months. So instead of making standards country by country, we are looking at having these standards at regional level. We have done this for lighting, and now we are in advanced minimum energy performance standards for cooling appliances. And we think in the strategic period we have until 2030, it's possible to develop the standards for EPCs, to develop the standards for induction cookers and any other electric cooking appliances. Then in at least 4 of the 8 East African countries, there's a big drive to promote electric cooking. But then what about the skills part? What certifications exist, if they are there? And if they exist, are they harmonized? And this is something we are looking at, to harmonize certifications for technicians, for trainers when it comes to installing these electric cooking appliances, because we're not looking at domestic level only, also at institutional level, operating them, maintaining them. We are looking at having a harmonized training system at regional level. The fourth area I would like to talk about at regional level is the awareness creation. We organize a number of conferences. We're already good at this at regional level, but also we have the ambition of having a regional conference which should focus on clean cooking, which brings together all the partner states and the stakeholders in it, so that we learn from each other. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Yunus. And this brings us to the end of our first session. And I would request you to give our panelists a round of applause for taking us through and responding to that. I'll now open the floor to the audience. I understand you were able to take quite a number of questions, and I'll request my namesake Ronnie to help me pass the microphone.
All right, keep it short and sweet. Your name and who you're addressing the question to. We have another mic there, so put up your hand and...
Thank you. My name is Agawa Kosma. I'm a teacher and a renewable energy researcher. And allow me direct to Mr. Patrick. About e-cooking, we have a challenge that especially when it rains, then in many parts of the country we shall not have electricity. And the issue has been with infrastructure. Are we planning to improve on the available infrastructure in that case? For actually this grid electricity tends to be like intermittent. Then, has any research been made about the feasibility of this e-cooking in rural areas and among the low-income earning city dwellers? Because people are used of, I can buy charcoal for 3,000 and then that charcoal is enough to cook for that particular day. Upfront cost of, for example, buying the cheapest pressure, it goes to, with subsidization, around 250,000 Ugandan shillings. Can we put measures to at least help people be able to at least manage the initial cost of this? And then, minus this conference, where else have we disseminated? Have we thought about passing through the cultural and religious leaders for they are able to convince the people? Otherwise, much of the time we get the information from people who are doing business, and as they are trying to convince us about this e-cooking, we think they are marketing their businesses. I thank you.
All right.
Yeah, thank you. My name is Seguja Rashid, and I work with Sakodo, Center for Integrated Research and Community Development, Uganda, as a technical manager. I'm not familiar with the names of the panelists, but I'll be mentioning the item. Maybe the panelist will get, the one who presented it will clearly get the information. I'll begin with the one who talked about enabling environment, and he talked about emphasizing creating more laboratories, because you see most of these technologies need to be tested before they are taken to the community. I just want to, in my opinion, don't waste a lot of energy in developing more laboratories. To me, I would think you would focus on empowering the already existing laboratories to be doing the work of testing these EPCs and other energy-saving technologies. Another point, I want to disagree with the panelist who talked about using electricity being so cheaper compared to like charcoal and other fuels. Why I would disagree? One, happen to be one of the users of EPCs, 100%, and I have 2 of them. But even before I mention or I disagree, I want to, this goes to the carbon credit funders, one EPC or even 2 or 3. Why? Because carbon finance does not allow that. You should have one. If you have, you will forge an ID of your grandmother or give there a telephone contact of a neighbor such that it looks like you are not the same person buying. So we need to come up with a policy, because look at how people use even charcoal. One will have 3 stoves or more than 1 stove. So if you strict us and you take us into forging IDs and names of other people to happen, not have one EPC, it's not correct. So the one of cheaper electricity, I have 2 EPCs at home. So if I put there tea, I put there katogo for breakfast. Assume each EPC will use half a unit, meaning that is 1 unit on breakfast. If I use the same meal, dish and food on lunch, those are 2 units already. On evening tea, maybe that is only tea half a unit, those are 2.5, and supper, so those are 3 units in a day, which is to me equivalent to the 3,000 shillings I was using to buy charcoal a day. So me, with using EPCs, I appreciate cleanliness, fast and emission-free, but with energy saving, it has not come out so clearly. And also last time I mentioned another problem. We have EPCs of different capacities. We have the one of 6 liters up to
Rashid,
the sizes.
if you could kindly summarize.
Yeah, 1 minute. Up to the sizes they have upgraded. But you look at these EPCs, they have different wattage capacity. The EPC of 6 liters will be using 1,000 watts, and the one which is upgrading maybe now 10 liters, it will have like 1.2 watts or 1.3. That means you'll be using more power compared to the smaller.
Thank you, Rashid. We'll take maybe 2 or 3 more questions. Hopefully there's a lady there. Let's keep it short and sweet.
Great. Thank you so much, Ronnie, and Ronnie as well, and thank you, the panelists. My name is Howard Mwesigwa, and I'm the team lead for energy and environment at Kalugumtima and Company. And my question goes to Mr. Dennis Mugaga from the Climate Finance Unit on the Article 6 mechanism here as we have it, but also extending it to clean cooking. And I know the Ministry of Water and Environment is currently undertaking the regulations we need. We've been advocating for those regulations for the longest time. And we look at, for example, countries like Ghana that have gone a long way. Even Kenya, I think, is taking some tremendous steps in having a more transparent, legal and regulatory framework around carbon markets. I don't know what your take is, Mr. Mugaga, on how we're involving.
Mr. Mwesigwa, if you could kindly just be clear on the question.
Yes, I was just getting the second, Ronnie, if I may proceed. Great. Yes, my question goes to Mr. Mugaga, of course, who was following. What are we doing exactly to ensure that we're involving the local communities who are actually at the tail end of the carbon markets, to ensure they understand how this is working, but also how they can benefit? Because some of the challenges there are middlemen who are going to take the lion's share, and yet the actual contribution is coming from these local communities or these individuals at the tail end. But also to understand that carbon market is not just about planting trees. It's so broad when it comes to the emissions reductions mechanism that can give you a latitude to benefit and participate in the carbon markets. Thank you.
All right, do we have a lady there? Thank you. Please turn it on. I'll use this one.
Yes, thank you so much. My name is Dr. Brenda, lecturer from MOBS. My question goes to ERA. Yeah? And also someone who talked about the domestic tariff that is currently on EPCs. How do the new meters convert me or get to know that actually I'm not using Yaka for I'm not using for lighting, but I'm now using for cooking to give me that domestic tariff? Okay? I have really struggled to see that. The other question goes to IACRI, Mr. Yunus. Yeah, my neighbor also tells me this. In Uganda, how do you work with different organized groups to try and take the information about energy efficiency? Because most consumers are suffering a lot on consumption because of energy efficiency, and especially on behavioral change and mindset. Then my neighbor also has something to add on. Thank you.
People are clever.
I think let's first take this. One more question, then we shall get back.
Good afternoon, everyone. My request is to fund organized groups like ours, the Empower, Equip Military Families Association, so that we can spread the gospel of e-power to all military families which are scattered all over the country.
For those questions, I see your hand, but let's first get responses to those, then we get back. Thank you.
Especially the one on Yaka meters, it seems at the grassroots level, people really want to know.
Okay. I think the first question was on infrastructure. What's the way forward? Because someone was asking, I think directed to Mr. Patrick, about the infrastructure challenges, and yet this is so critical when it comes to scaling up e-cooking. So what is ERA? What plans does ERA have in regards to that?
Okay, thank you very much. The question was about power reliability, right? Power going off. Okay. Of course, one of the challenges of using electricity is that the network may not give you power every minute of the year. But also, I can tell you that I have used the LPG before, that when you are using a gas cylinder, you can also be cooking and actually gas gets finished. Now, I know that networks globally are not at the same level, but we have to acknowledge where ours has come from. Different parts of the country have different levels of reliability. You find that in rural areas where you have weaker lines and you have lines that are very far away from substations, you find that the reliability levels of those lines is actually much lower than maybe reliability levels of lines in Kampala. And even in Kampala, you find that different areas have different reliability levels, but this is a continuous process. You find that in some areas, in January, power is more stable, but because maybe a factory gets established in those areas and it jeopardizes how reliable power becomes in that area until reinforcement works are done. So the issue of power reliability is a continuous challenge that we deal with, and the reason why we need a versatile operator to ensure that when these challenges arise, they are resolved. But if we are to be very honest with ourselves, that the state of power reliability that we had 10 years ago is not the same state that we are now. We are at a much level of reliability generally as a country, although we recognize that there will be certain areas where you find that their power has deteriorated. But this is something that gets worked on, and it's a continuous process. It's not something which we say we have improved and will not go back. It's not something we say it has deteriorated and will not improve. So it's something that we have to continually keep addressing as a regulatory authority with the licensed companies that we regulate. But also maybe to highlight that from the year 2020, the issue of power reliability becomes a direct regulatory target, that if a distribution company improves power reliability, there is an incentive that there is a reward that they get in their tariff structure. And when reliability targets are not achieved, then the company is penalized. So the regulation takes reliability very seriously, and it's part of the regulatory targets that are set for distribution companies. We recognize that it is a challenge that we have to deal with all the time, and our desire is that our networks progressively keep improving to ensure that we achieve more and more levels of power reliability. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Patrick. I think there was one more question that came from Doctor about meters. I think maybe you could exhaust all the questions, then we move.
Yes, there was an issue about, before the one of meters, there was a question on cost comparison. I think this is scientific, and I know that many people have used EPCs. I don't know why an equipment would be called an EPC and needs a half a unit to cook what we call katogo. Because my experience with the different cookers is that Katogo will take you less than 0.25 units. If yours takes half a unit, I hope there is somebody from Makerere University Center for Renewable Energy. That EPC needs to be checked. It cannot be an EPC if it can cook Katogo at half a unit.
Thank you very much.
On the issue of meters, we have had long discussions on how we can make the cooking tariff a little more targeted. But what we need to know is that the cooking tariff does not segregate which power is being used for cooking and which power is being used for other things. Although, that's where we intend to go. Because technology keeps enabling us to achieve things that we were not achieving before. Currently, we have seen that equipments themselves can be monitored. So, if we are able to achieve a level of supply chain whereby most of our electric cooking equipments can be metered, can be monitored, and then you know that, of course, an EPC or a cooker cannot be used for ironing. So if you are able to monitor a cooker, which we have seen starting to happen, if we are able to have this, the energy usage of this equipment being monitored at a licensed company level, then we should be able to differentiate and give you full benefits of a tariff, a lower tariff for the energy that is used for cooking. But for now, there is an assumption that was included that by the time somebody achieves energy usage of 80 units in a month, then most likely as a domestic user, you are not only using cooking electricity for ironing, for TV, you are likely to be a person who uses electricity for cooking. And that's why right now that e-cooking tariff has a threshold of 80 units every month, so it's being enjoyed by people who are able to use 80 units and above. But it's also capped because we realize that if you do not cap the number of units, then you are likely to have some people who are even converting households for industrial use, and that's not our objective of the cooking tariff. So there is also a capping of 150 units, and for that matter, the electricity cooking tariff, that lower tariff of 412 shillings applies to the units that you use up to a maximum of 150, having started from 80 every month. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. There was a question directed to Yunus, if you could respond to that.
Yeah, thank you. The question from Dr. Brenda was about how we work with organized groups, and also about the issues when it comes to